Welcome everyone to our Sunday Wisdom session where we are going through session by session a study of the book by Swami Parthasarathi entitled The Fall of the Human Intellect. So Jan, you've got your copy with you? It's around.
I have some notes of the book, so yes, I do.
The Fall of the Human Intellect, it is the first book that we start in the residential program at the Vedanta Academy and also in the Vedanta e-learning course. And it's a crucial book because it explains to us the anatomy of thinking, the anatomy of our inner personality, the outer personality as well. But what we're more interested in these sessions is on what basis does the inner personality drive the outer personality. And as your inner personality, so often it reflects on the outer personality, but not just that, your external environment as well. As your mind, so your world. In the previous sessions, we went one step further and we said, as your vasanas, so your world. As the seeds of your personality, so the world that you see. And how interesting is it that for some, parts of another person's world don't exist. So not to distract any of our class members, but right now, one of the biggest matches in world sport, India versus Pakistan in a World Cup is going on. But for Johan, I'm not even sure if he knows what cricket is. So that world does not exist. Same thing. As our interests, so our world. But if you change your interests, suddenly a world opens up. And that's why it's fascinating to find, we had our international retreat a week ago. And in the international retreat, we had people coming from 18 countries. And for some, it was their first time to India. But for many, India was never in the itinerary. It was never something that they realistically thought they would ever visit. And because of their inner demand for self-development, for philosophy, our worlds collided. We met in some part of the world outside of India, and from that meeting, philosophy, a philosophical environment, India, that world opened up to them. And when they visited, it's become a part of their reality. As your mind, so your world. If there was no philosophical thought, perhaps it could have been business. India has become a center of great commerce as well. But whatever your mind is, it will project your immediate environment, this body, but also the outer one. In this session, we're going to talk about the different types of thinking, how thinking has evolved over different eras and ages, the difference between thinking and feeling, the mechanism of decision making, choices, and then also some of the pitfalls to watch out for. What are some of the mistakes we make in thinking and how beautifully our own mind sabotages some of our decisions? So that's what we've got lined up for today. So let's begin. There are 4 ages of thinking. And this traces the history of human development. You can see how thought has developed. It starts with the age of perception. So the age of perception means that right in the beginning, human beings started with, they would just watch, just gaze. So it's also called the age of gazing. So there's no action, there's no reaction to the world. They are passive in their thinking. And the example that comes to mind, and Swamiji's made it so graphic, this example, and unfortunately given the animal, the buffalo, such a bad reputation, he would say, look at the buffalo. Even if you produce a rabbit out of a hat, the buffalo doesn't even turn. You put fireworks there, the buffalo doesn't react. So difficult to get the buffalo to react to anything. Similarly, amongst human beings, there was a stage where there was no action, there was no reaction, it was just simply gazing. So no emotion, no thought, no analysis. When you go one step further, we call that the age of observation. Because now the intellect is starting to surface, and the intellect starts observing different phenomena happening. But what do you think is the limitation here? Age of perception, we clear. There's no reaction, there is no anticipation, and there is no learning. But with age of observation, people are watching, they're observing. But what is the limitation? What would be the problem here?
Endless thoughts or judgment.
Endless thoughts and judgment. Okay. Yes. Sometimes we categorize everything we go through. Yes.
No action.
No action. Okay. Just observing, right? What else? What's the problem?
Language. Drawing wrong conclusion.
Drawing wrong conclusions. Mm-hmm.
Language.
Language.
Communication.
Okay. Just observing, not talking. All right. Poor communication. Not understanding.
Not understand. Yeah.
Age of observation. The limitation here is people are observing, positive. So the intellect is aware, it's becoming active in day-to-day life. But the trouble is, the intellect is not that strong. So it incorrectly links cause and effect. So for instance, it would be, I'm playing a football match and my team won. Why did my team win? I didn't shave today. So they say, cause is, I didn't shave today, our team won today. And, looking at your reactions, some might say that this is something that is absurd. But there are players today that will wear the same wristband. They will have the same type of shave to try and win the match. So they observe certain phenomena but incorrectly connect cause and effect. So for instance, somebody sees the trees and the leaves moving. Rain is coming. But that's a wrong conclusion because that only means that the wind is blowing. And yes, often when the wind blows, it may start raining as well, but there's no direct correlation. There's no direct cause and effect, and it's not always the case. So at the age of observation, it's also called the age of superstition, where we incorrectly connect cause and effect. And we have to be careful of this because it is so easy, just because of lack of application, lack of effort, not wanting to put an effort into our thinking, not being patient enough to see if those correlations are consistent to become laws. And because of that, we become victims of superstition. Do you know, if you drink milk at 3 p.m., your family will be blessed? How? No, I did it with my family. So of course it'll work. And then, you try it You say, look, actually, my family, we're a little bit worse off. We're fighting with each other. I don't think it's working. No, 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 no. You must have done it late. 3:01, you must have done it. You must do it at 3 p.m. exactly. And the person says, okay. Never mind that they are attached. Never mind that they are expressing and venting all their emotions on the family members. The problem is not having milk at 3 p.m. This is how absurd it is. So they go and they ensure 3 p.m. they have the milk. And still no improvement on the family relations. They go back to the person who suggested this, and the person says, what kind of milk are you drinking? I'm drinking milk from Jersey cow. Jersey cow, that's the problem. You must drink from A2 cow. No basis, no substantiation. And anything in our purview which does not have or cannot be explained, the cause and effect, be careful of, because then we're surrendering our thinking to blind superstition. The next level, and as humans evolved, you can see now, and this was an era of so much progress, and if we look at the last 100 years or so, incredible, but it's been a change in thinking, and that revolution, as it were, was the age of scientific inquiry. Because the age of scientific inquiry didn't just link cause and effect incorrectly, make the wrong conclusions. It asked why. Why, when the leaves blow and move, does it rain? Does it always rain? Is it always the case? And the moment they question and put their observation to the test of scrutiny, inquiry, they realized, this is not consistent. But where the observations were consistent, where it provided the same result constantly, one after the other, this is how laws were made. And based on those laws, human beings are using for science, for development. Now, Vedanta has done the same thing. Vedanta has taken the phenomenon of the mind and the intellect, the choices and actions of a human being. So it looks at the individual and it worked out the observations. If a human being thinks like this, this will be the result. If a human being thinks like that, that is the result. And they observed it consistently. And based on those consistent conclusions, the laws of the individual, the laws of the human being were made, and that is Vedanta, the science of the individual. This is the age of scientific inquiry. Galileo, he says, I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect has intended us to forego their use. There is a reason why a human being of all species has this unique talent and skill to analyze, to reason, to have the ability to take a thought and go one step back and have thought observe thought. Animals cannot do this. Plants cannot do this, but a human being can. And if we are not using it, we are stuck in the age of perception, or if not developed, in the age of observation. And if we start developing it, we get to the age of scientific inquiry. But this is still only in the periphery of the gross intellect. And the gross intellect pertains to the world. So it looks at the laws and the phenomenon of the world, but the age of contemplation goes one step deeper, where you start asking questions about the law themselves. Why does this law always remain consistent? Why does this law exist? What is the purpose of it? And when we start doing contemplation, it becomes the field of spirituality. You start looking at what is beyond the substratum of this world. What is that which enlivens, quickens, empowers this world? And this is the age of contemplation. It requires a subtle intellect. And I'm not sure if you've come across different thinkers, but you'll get some incredible scientists. Gross intellect, fantastic. They can explain nuclear physics to you. They can break it down. But there is no inquiry beyond. It ends with atoms and molecules. The God particle. We met some scientists at CERN. Fascinating. Some only looking at matter, not wanting to go beyond. Everything must be explained by matter. And there are some scientists who have the contemplation angle. There has to be something beyond matter to explain all of this. Where is it? We see matter moving, changing, sometimes appearing, disappearing. Where does it go? Albert Einstein was one such scientist who had a tremendous gross intellect. Of course, we all know Albert Einstein, but he was also on a spiritual quest. He was looking for that law that was behind all laws. And Albert Einstein says, and this is where you see his subtle intellect, he says, try and penetrate, without limited means, the secrets of nature, the world. And you will find that behind all the discernible laws and connections, there remains something subtle, intangible, and inexplicable. Veneration, worship, respect for this force beyond anything that we can comprehend is my religion. So often when we think about religion or spirituality, we think perhaps a particular God, a particular book. Albert Einstein saying, for him, it is this force behind all forces, this law behind all laws. Who is it that all those laws pay obeisance to? What is that force that holds all these laws together? That it is so consistent wherever you go. That is the age of contemplation. Now, when we observe the world, where do you think humanity is? Age of perception, observation, scientific inquiry, or the age of contemplation? What do you think?
Scientific inquiry.
Scientific inquiry. Okay.
Beginning the age of contemplation, I would say.
Beginning contemplation. Definitely in this class.
So the age of observation.
Oh, age of observation. Yes, many are in age of observation. We find a lot of the world following mechanical rituals, blind beliefs, superstitions. And there are so many of these that we don't question. For example, in India, you break a coconut at the temple to initiate a prayer. Why? Nobody knows. Why do you light a lamp? No one knows. Why do you light a candle? Nobody knows. Why do you remove your hat when you go into a church, temple, mosque? Why? We don't know the meaning behind it. This means it's age of observation. We're just watching and perceiving, listening. So often and I was telling you about my day today. We heard prayers from different faiths in the morning, and While it was inspiring, you could feel the feeling of those who were giving it. I don't know Hebrew. The Sanskrit was said so fast, I could not follow the Sanskrit. There was Hindi. There was different languages. If we don't know the meaning of the prayer, how does the prayer benefit you? Age of perception and observation. We're just taking it in, but it's having no action, reaction, transformation for us. Wherever we are, and I would say the world is probably a mixture of all four, not one particular level. I'd say you have some people who are in tamas. Tamas means sleep, which is they're just buffalo state, which means just passively taking in the world, gazing, not reacting. Then you've got observation. So they're connecting, but the connections are not strong because the intellect is not strong. So the intellect doesn't have that discipline, doesn't have that method to connect cause and effect correctly. There is a book that we study at the academy. It is not an essential text, but it is a recommended text that especially after the 3-year course we take up. It is a text called Clearer Thinking, and it is by A.E. Mander. It's also called Logic for Every Man. So for those of you who are interested in the art of thinking, Logic for Every Man or Clearer Thinking. And here A.E. Mander says, most mistakes in thinking are due not to the lack of intelligence, but to lack of method. So intelligence might be strong, but because the method is either prejudice, because the starting point may be wrong, because perhaps even the research is funded by an organization with an agenda to get a particular conclusion, the starting point is wrong. So when the method is wrong, the thinking is flawed. And that's the gap between observation and scientific inquiry. And to go from scientific inquiry to contemplation is to ask the deeper question. Why? For what? What's beyond? And that is when the mumukshakva, the desire for liberation, the desire to find the truth, the supreme reality, that's when the spiritual path occurs. As I'm sure there's been a spark in each and every one of you in different forms, different times. It might happen at the age of 7. There's one saint, we study one of his books, 2 of his books. He's called Adi Shankaracharya. He left his home at 7 years old, just walked out. Parents had given him money to pay for school fees. He kept on walking, disappeared in the hills, went into meditation. Came back a great saint at the age of 12, 13, giving discourses, spiritual discourses amongst all the learned people in the temples. It could be at 7. It could be at 50. It could be at 70. May not happen. No subtle intellect appears in this lifetime. Now, these are the different stages of thinking. Different from thinking is feeling. Where is the center of feeling?
Mind.
The mind, manas. So if we have a look at the diagram that we studied last week, we saw that the source, right at the top, is the spirit. The spirit functioning through your vasanas, through the seeds, through your programming, expresses as the type of body, but also the type of mind, your feelings, and the type of intellect, the type of thinking that you have. So when we talk about thinking and feeling, thinking belongs to the realm of intellect, mind belongs to the realm of feeling. Now, this simple explanation is something that we should have digested at primary school, because all choices, all decisions come down to what does the mind and intellect decide for the body to perform an act. Every action, from morning to night, from the womb to the tomb, is a conversation between these two, mind and intellect. So the dilemma of choice, or the human mechanism, is this. As a human being, when we have to act, there are three choices. One, the mind decides the action based on feeling, emotion, like and dislike, desire. The second, the intellect decides based on analysis, reason, judgment, and discrimination. So you weigh up the pros, you weigh up the cons, and you come to a conclusion. What is the third option?
Mixed.
Mixed, yeah. I'm glad nobody said you don't decide. I guess that's also an option. You don't make a decision. The third option is, and this is elevated living, is when your action is backed by the mind's desire, the mind's feeling and emotion, the mind's passion, but also the intellect's reasoning, also the intellect's judgment. So they both agree and say, let's go for it. So imagine what you feel like doing is also what you think is best for you. What a life. Imagine if you enjoyed exercise. If you enjoyed early morning study, developing your intellect. You're looking forward to the morning study session. Imagine if it was that easy. Wow. It's not that easy. But when the two get together, there's a confluence in our personality. Our personality is aligned. And then you find there's wind in your sails. Now the trouble is, what happens if they disagree? When our feeling says one thing and our thinking says one thing. A diabetic. A diabetic has a sweet tooth and also has a desire for particularly dark chocolate. And I present this diabetic with some lovely dark chocolate from Switzerland. And the diabetic has a choice to make. Now, why am I presenting a diabetic with chocolate? For sociology purposes, for research and development. I present the diabetic with some chocolate, and fascinating, because you can see the dilemma going on. You've got three choices there. Okay, so first choice, what does the mind say? Eat the chocolate. What does the intellect say?
Do that. Not good for you.
Not good for you, not a good idea. Remember what happened last time? Sugar spiked, you had to get an injection, not a good idea. Third option, is it possible they can agree? Yes. The diabetic could say, you have been very disciplined this week. Your sugar is low. The quality of the chocolate is high. Go on. Have some chocolate. So the mind and intellect can agree, but the difference is the mind just feels. It doesn't think about consequences. It doesn't think about tomorrow. The intellect weighs the situation. And while it's not there to destroy your joy, to destroy your pleasure, to ensure you never have chocolate, it is there to ensure you don't have regret and you don't suffer. But now suppose, if the mind and intellect disagree, mind says, yes, eat the chocolate. Intellect says, not even a bite. What will the diabetic do?
It depends on the strength of his intellect.
Strength of his intellect? Mm-hmm.
Eats it and be guilty.
He eats the chocolate?
Be unhappy.
Oh, yeah. That often causes so much of this stress. This dilemma between mind and intellect, this indecision, causes so much of stress. But ultimately, what that person, that individual will do, will depend on who's stronger in the personality, the mind or the intellect. But this is frightening if we think about it, because your intellect actually knows that you will regret it tomorrow, that knows that it is not the goal that you're working for. But because the mind is strong, the desire and the like and the feeling is so overwhelming, the diabetic eats the chocolate, suffers the consequences. Now, similarly for you and me, it may not be chocolate. It could be the host of desires that we have. If our mind is stronger than our intellect, we are not in charge of our decisions. We might claim freedom, independence, but actually we are slaves to our emotions, our likes and dislikes, our feelings. Animals don't have this problem. Animals don't have this problem because there is no intellect. So they go with the impulse, they go with the instinct, they go with the feeling. Simple. If we look at the different species, you've got plant, animal, human. The plant has a body? Yes. Can we say a plant has a mind, experiences emotions? There's no central nervous system, there's no brain, there's no organ to experience the emotion. No mind. The mind and intellect, no doubt, are subtler instruments beyond the brain, but we don't experience the emotions of plants. And some say, but they react. They react to different types of music. I would say that's more a reaction at the physical level, frequencies. And does a plant have an intellect? So, ability to act apart from its nature, ability to think differently. No intellect. With an animal, we can see that it has a body. Those of you who have pets, you would have seen incredible feelings and emotions from your pet, perhaps more consistent than family members. The emotion and love that you receive from your pets. But can an animal change? Can it change its nature? And we see that animals don't have that ability. They more or less exhibit the same nature that they have. We see this with, how many of you have pets? Okay. All right. So looking at those of you who've put your hand up, I know that most of them are dogs. Even within dogs, each species got a particular type of nature. So you find golden retrievers. They have a more friendly nature. They're looking for affection. They're looking for company. If you have a cat, different nature. It has its own, the cat is clearly the boss. It has its own determination. It will decide when you can stroke me, when you cannot. The dog is always ready for belly rubs, but different types of dogs. If you go to the Rottweiler, they are not looking for belly rubs. They are looking for your belly. They are designed differently. So even within dogs, they all have a particular type of nature. They can't change it. So you will not get a vegetarian tiger. You will not get a meat-eating cow. They cannot change their nature. But as human beings, we have a body, we have feelings. Yes, incredible intensity of feeling. But we also have the ability to manage feeling. We have the ability to think. We have the ability to act apart from feeling. And this is what makes us human. So whereas plants and animals do not have an intellect, a human being does. The question is, why are we not using it? And when we fail to use it, we fail to be human. Now, when we talk about using the intellect, develop the intellect, the notion that comes to mind is a human being a robot just thinking? Is a human being just similar to AI? You put in and you get out whatever is the best outcome, weigh up the pros, weigh up the cons? No. A human being is both. It is a feeling and a thinking being. So you take the emotions of the mind, you run it through the intellect. But ultimately, when you have to make a decision, which equipment do you use? The intellect. Because that is its purpose. So the intellect takes the feelings of the mind as data, takes the instincts that the mind may be perceiving, feeling, and runs it through its analysis to the best of its ability and comes to a decision. This function in a human being is called objectivity. And it comes from the Latin word ob and jectare. And objectivity, if you go to the etymology, the Latin etymology is fascinating. It says ob means to against or on. And iactare or jactare means to throw. So it means to throw something against thought, against the mind. In the sense, to throw a thought up for analysis. So that ability to be self-aware, to take a step back and look at your own feeling, to look at your own thinking, that is the intellect. To be conscious of your feeling. And if we understand this, it is so liberating because you realize your feelings are not you. You have a choice. You get to decide what to do with feelings. You have a higher thought, another thought that you can throw emotion up against for scrutiny, for analysis, and decide how to manage it. So for those of us who have experienced strong emotions, and it could be grief, it could be loneliness, it could be sadness, it could be joy also. We need not be dictated by the emotion. And where the emotion works for us, where the emotion is an aid, a wind in our sails, by all means harness it. But who decides? Who decides whether that emotion can be harnessed or that emotion is allowed to run havoc in our personality? And that is the intellect. So whilst, yes, we are both a feeling and a thinking being, if we are to make a decision and to act on the decision, use the mind, no doubt. There may be some certain positive attributes, positive emotions to take into account that could help the interaction. How? The mind can help with connection. The mind can help with motivation. The mind can help with propulsion, passion. But the mind can also lead to burnout. The mind can also lead to loss of concentration. The mind can also lead to paralysis. Paralysis in the sense, no action taken. It hijacks our thinking. And there is a poem that talks about this. So, first aspect is, we've got to be careful. Our mind is not designed for decision making. That's why we have an intellect. We've got the mind for other functions, procreation, intimacy, So the mind has all these aspects. Affection. Mind has got these aspects, but the direction of the mind, the harnessing, management, channeling of the mind has to be done by the intellect. So 90% of the world functions mainly on the mind. That handful that start using reason, thinking, they use the thinking and reason for what? Anybody?
Contemplation.
Then that's 0.00005% of humanity.
For professional work,
For professional work, okay, yes. More still, I'd say on the intelligence side rather than the intellect side. They use it, we use it to justify the mind's desires. So even if we start using the intellect, what do? We use the intellect to justify why the mind is feeling what it's feeling, why the mind wants what it wants. And there's a beautiful poem in the book that talks about this. And it's called The Pond. And it's based on an anthology, a collection of poems that Swamiji has chosen. And they seem so simple, so innocuous. It's only when you read the name of the poet that you realize there must be some great depth here. Poets such as William Wordsworth, William Shakespeare, John Milton. And I'll read out the poem for you. And then, as always, let's philosophize. So we'll project the poem, you follow along, or you can hear it as I read. The Pond. There was a round pond and a pretty pond too. About it white daisies and violets grew, and dark weeping willows that stood to the ground, dipped in their long branches and shaded it round. A party of ducks to this pond would repair, to feast on the green water weeds that grew there. Indeed, the assembly would frequently meet, to discuss their affairs in this pleasant retreat. Now the subjects on which they were wont to converse, I'm sorry, I cannot include in verse. For though I've oft listened in hopes of discerning, I own 'tis a matter that baffles my learning. No philosophy just yet, just setting the scene. And the dark weeping willows, it sets the scene for a tragedy. That's it. So there's a party of ducks, and the poet would often see the party of ducks there and would think, what are the ducks talking about? That's it. But now our story starts. One day, a young chicken that lived thereabout stood watching to see the ducks pass in and out, now standing tail upward, now diving below. She thought of all the things she should like to do so. So the poor silly chick was determined to try. She thought 'twas as easy to swim as to fly. Though her mother had told her she must not go near, she foolishly thought there was nothing to fear. My feet, wings and feathers, for aught that I see, as good as the ducks are for swimming, said she. Though my beak is pointed, as their beaks are round, is there any reason that I should be drowned? Remember this question. So the chick analyzes, asks the question from the analysis. My feet, wings and feathers, for aught that I see, as good as the ducks are for swimming, said she. And if you follow the analysis, though my beak is pointed, as their beaks are round, is that any reason that I should be drowned? And the answer to that question is, if one animal's beak is pointed and another's round, just that question alone, is that a reason a person should drown? An animal should drown? Anybody? No, that's not a reason for it. So therefore, what happens? Why should I not swim then as well as the duck? I think I shall venture and even try my luck. For, said she, spite of all that a mother had taught her, I'm really remarkably fond of the water. So in this poor ignorant animal flew, but soon found her dear mother's cautions were true. She splashed and she dashed and she turned herself round and heartily wished herself safe on the ground. But now 'twas too late to begin to repent. The harder she struggled, the deeper she went. And when every effort had vainly been tried, she slowly sunk down to the bottom and died. The ducks, I perceived, began loudly to quack when they saw the poor fowl floating dead on its back. And by their grave gestures and looks 'twas apparent, they discussed on the sin of not minding a parent. What's the philosophy, friends?
Did you follow blindly just because someone else is doing that?
Yes, okay. They just followed what others were doing.
Herd mentality?
Okay, herd mentality.
Intellect decided based on the feelings what they like to swim.
Yeah, the intellect decided on feelings. Okay.
Can I say, whose intellect are you using? The chick was using its own, should have been using its mother's.
That is a very convenient argument from Wanjiru because she's a mother of 3. So she's hoping that the children listen to this lecture. The chick was using its own intellect. Yes, it's a point. If we analyze.
Assessment.
Wrong assessment. Sureka, okay. If we analyze, it all started with what? What did it start with?
Desire.
It started with a desire. It started with a desire, a strong feeling to swim. She saw the ducks having a good time. I want to have a good time. And we can see the clues in the language. I'm really remarkably fond of the water. Not just fond. I'm really remarkably fond of the water. So it's not just a desire, it's a very strong desire. And when that desire is strong, all right, so the mind is strong. Now, this chick came to the Vedanta class last week and said, I need to use my intellect. Although we just covered that animals don't have an intellect, but just for story purposes, it says, okay, I'm going to use my intellect. And what does the chick analyze? It says, my feet, wings, and feathers are the same as the ducks. Is that true? It's not even true.
No.
Because you can see clearly the duck's feet is webbed. The chick's feet is not webbed. And yet it analyzes and it sees what it wants to see. So what is happening here, and this is the one thing that we have to be careful of, is that when we are under the influence of a strong emotion or a desire, question, our thinking might be compromised. It is the mind taking hold of the intellect and holding it hostage and saying to the intellect, hey intellect, you better reason, but give me the outcome that I want. Give me the conclusion, the desire that I want. And this is when our objectivity is lost because the thinking is influenced by the mind. It's not objective to the mind and the feeling. So yes, you can take the mind's consideration into account, but it should not bias, influence, prejudice your thinking. Then your objectivity is lost. So we have to be careful and clear. What is our reasoning saying? What is our emotion saying? And then to ensure that it does not influence, we've got to keep them very clearly apart. So true thinking or true objectivity proceeds like this. And you might find us justifying in so many ways. It could be you make a decision to want to wake up early in the morning, but when you put the alarm on, your mind holds your intellect hostage because your mind wants you to sleep in. It's a little bit cold, end of winter here, and you want to sleep in. So the mind catches hold of the intellect and gets your intellect to reason and say, you read that article about how important it is to sleep? And we sabotage the very thing that we wanted to do. We use reason to justify the desire. So here is a very helpful tool to check if we are justifying or we are being objective. Both seem to be using the intellect, but there is a vast difference. And you see it here. The difference between objectivity and justification is that when you are objective, you analyze the information first and then come to a conclusion of what you should do. Should I go on holiday? First do the analysis. Don't bring in the desire just yet. All right, so the question you're analyzing. So analyze first, then conclusion. But when you're justifying, this is how you know it's justification, or this is how you know that your thinking has been compromised. If you've already concluded, I'm going on holiday. Now let's find reasons to support the holiday. You see that? One, it makes sense? You've got the conclusion, and now you're trying to justify and find reasons to support the conclusion. So you're not thinking clearly, you're not presenting it to the scrutiny of thought, intellect, you're not being objective. This is prejudiced. Reasoning in a circle. You've already decided. Therefore, what can we do? And you will find all of these sessions will end pretty much the same way. Develop the intellect. Develop the intellect so that you can start seeing these tricks of the mind. So that you can start separating the intellect from the biases of the mind. You can see what the mind wants, but you can think independently too. And in the interim, whilst our intellect may not be strong enough, at the moment it's compromised because the mind is too strong, but at least it's functioning, yes. What we can do is what Wanjiru suggested. Let us consult a higher intellect. Somebody who is more objective, and check our thinking process with them. Not surrender our thinking process, not outsource it, but check our thinking process with them. And what they will do is they will spot the holes. So if the chick had gone back to its mother would have said, but you don't have the same feet. But there was no getting back to the mother. Possibly because the chick also knew that the mother would dissuade. But that again is justification. So when we are not sure, it is important to have that person in life, and that is the role of the guru, a dispeller of darkness, somebody you believe has two qualifications. First is no agenda. They don't want anything from you. They're only looking to serve. And the second, they must have more objectivity, a stronger intellect than you. They don't tell you what to do, but they brainstorm with you to show the holes or flaws in your thinking process. So let's conclude. There are 4 stages of intellect. We've covered it in the 4 different eras, but let's bring it into contemporary thought and practical application. We might be in a situation where the intellect is not active at all. We're going purely by feeling, emotion, impulse. This is danger. Red flag all over. Because the mind doesn't have any direction. It's like a wind. It will toss you one side, it'll leave you on the rocks, it might leave you in a good direction one day, but no predictability. Then the intellect starts functioning, but it is weak, so it's held hostage by the mind. When the intellect gets stronger, it can govern the mind, but it's not able to connect the dots. The reasoning is still weak. But as you use the intellect more and more, and for the large or the important decisions in your life, you take guidance, you take counsel from a higher intellect. When your intellect becomes stronger, then you get the strong management in your personality. Your reasoning gives you consistent positive outcomes towards the life and goal that you want. A human being is both feeling and thinking. Don't suppress the feelings, but when we make a decision, those feelings must be guided ultimately by the discretion of your intellect. Any questions?
That was very enlightening, Sudhakarji. This is Tilak from Providence. A thought crossed my mind. I read Malcolm Gladwell, and he has a book called Blink. And sometimes you just resort to your intuition, gut, and come up with a snap decision reflexively. And I'm just wondering, is there some risk to over analysis, overthinking, and then you get into some sort of inertia?
Sure. So overthinking is not objectivity. Overthinking again falls under the mind. How do I say that? If you are thinking clearly, objectively, it will flow linear, which is collect the data, analyze the data, come to a conclusion. Overthinking is when you want to revisit the decision. So it sends you back on a loop. But the reason why you are overthinking is because of fear, doubt. These are the emotions of the mind. So if you find yourself questioning a decision, going back, so action paralysis, decision paralysis, it is because of the mind's insecurity. What we need to tell the mind is, hang on, have we done the due process? So you might find, okay, there was insufficient data. All right, go and get the data. Then you've analyzed the data, you've come to your conclusion. Now you've got to act on it. But then again, perhaps you hear a point of view from another person, put that through. Ask the intellect, has this point been covered? And you look at your analysis, yes, it's covered. Okay, no need to revisit. Or is this a crucial point that we did not know before? Yes, okay, put it back in the system, come to a conclusion. So if we're using the intellect correctly, we will come to linear conclusions. If anyone is saying that I have been thinking about marriage for 10 years, I've been engaged for 10 years, I'm still not sure, that means not using the intellect, being influenced by the mind. You have more than enough data on the person to decide right now, pros and cons, decide. But the intellect is not strong. Now, intuition, on the other hand, comes from the mind. It is from knowledge, which is positive, from experience, which is positive, based on the past. And in a situation similar to something you might have experienced in the past, it comes to you as almost an instant knowing, a reflex, as it were. So Tilak, while it may be based on knowledge and experience, I would say still run it through the intellect, because the context of the present situation might be different from the past experience or the past context. So don't dismiss it. If you've got a strong intuition because of your experience and your expertise, run it through the intellect. Maybe check it, verify it. Why do I feel so strongly about it? But I wouldn't act directly on the intuition.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So that question, Manisha here. So I recently read an article and saw this. This was from one of the senior leaders in the country, and he was talking about reputation is something which is very important for a leader. So this brings me to the question of how are we being perceived? Is that very important? Should we use mind or intellect for this? I know the answer would be intellect, which is realistically, but what is your thoughts on that?
So it does depend on your profession. So for a leader, no doubt the feedback from the followers is important. And at the same time, whilst we take in the feedback in a constructive way to see perhaps what policy, what needs to change, what needs to shift, whilst that is important, the intellect should also understand that it is impossible to manage everybody's opinions. And if we are trying to manage everyone's opinions, we will be the most agitated person. So if one can, in that field, take the feedback without personalizing it, without trying to change every single person's opinion, one can move about it constructively. But what some might do is they will find that one dissident voice, that one criticism, that one troll that says something negative. Everything else is positive, but that one person that criticizes, and it will ruin our happiness. We want to engage with that person. We want to find out why that person is saying that. And sometimes the person does not have any reason behind it. Could just be an envious, negative person. So we have to be careful of going down that rabbit hole, of trying to please everyone, because you cannot please everyone.
Thank you.
Can we say that intuition is the accelerator of intelligence? So Anna, when we say accelerator of intelligence, yes, information that comes to you instantly. But you're not sure exactly why you feel that. So it comes to you and it is based on intelligence, but you probably have to spend time to break it up and find out why do you have that feeling. So for instance, a patient walks in and straight away the doctor feels, there's something wrong with your lumbar. Just from posture, hasn't done any tests yet, but it's based on experience, it's based on micro observations, and the doctor himself may not know why he's feeling that. So it may be worth to check the intuition, yes, and he himself would have to break it down to find out why is he thinking that. So there may be valid reasoning, there may be valid ideas that he's not consciously picked up. So intuition is an interesting one. But because it's not conscious and because it's not fully thought out, we have to check it.
Sudhakarji,
Yes.
there is a major distinction between justification and objectivity. Meaning it happens to all of us, and we are very, very vulnerable to that. Are there any easy hacks or some quick checks that one can do to see whether it's actually our powerful desire overpowering, or it is still the intellect which was right, but we also have that strong desire? Meaning, how can we foolproof it? How can we improve our hit rate?
So to check our objectivity, two things. The first is, we mentioned the chronology. Was it analysis first or conclusion? If it's justification, it'll be conclusion first and then analysis. The second is to check our thinking with a higher intellect. But the third, which we did not mention, or we mentioned it passingly, which is if you have a strong desire in an area, assume that your thinking will be influenced. So if you have a strong desire, consider yourself conflict of interest. It is difficult for me to think clearly in this area. The stronger the desire, the greater the difficulty to. And you might say, no, I'm thinking clearly. We don't even see the bias. We don't even see the prejudice. Because it's so ingrained in our desire, it's so ingrained in our programming, it's so ingrained in the mind's likes and dislikes, emotions, conditioning. So that is where we need to take a step back, perhaps with the help of another person, or even with ourselves, with a little bit of self-awareness, understanding that if it's a strong desire, there's chances for mistakes. So friends, we conclude there. Just before we go, next week, interesting topic, the 6 reasons for marriage. Right? It's part of the book. So if you're looking surprised, we're discussing it as we go through our study of the book. But also, we are starting our tour. In fact, we started this week. We've been in Delhi. We had some wonderful talks with schools, with corporates, and also some great meetings to take this knowledge forward. So having finished Delhi, we move on to South Africa. For those of you who would like to join us for a retreat in a part of the world that's close to you, we have a retreat in Mauritius in mid-March. We have a retreat in Uruguay in April, and we have a retreat in mid-May in Prague. So for those details, you're welcome to message our team and we'll share that with you. It's also available on the website. So thank you everybody for joining us and see you next week for the 6 reasons for marriage.